The haunting feeling that follows is of pure suspense with possible dread. As Karen and Blade ride through the city over the bridge, we are haunted by the music, but also haunted by the pure essence of intrigue. With the twilight sun bursting through the buildings, I was particularly impressed with this scene because it actually reminded me of being buzzed or intoxicated. The way all the light that existed in the scene was almost camouflaged or deepened or darkened into itself to create a sense of slight euphoria. Yeah, you might end up one day waking up and finding yourself extinct. Hello and welcome to the Fanatics of Film. My name is Ben, and we are just jumping into this movie that I just saw for the first time last night. And this is actually quite hilarious. And I know that you have probably seen this movie. If you clicked on this video, you've seen this film. I had not seen it until now. This is crazy. It's hilarious. And I heard about it, of course. And to be completely straightforward, when I think this came out in 1998. So I was 23 when this movie came out. And so at that time in my life, probably not watching as well. I was still watching movies, of course. I was watching movies, but I was playing a lot of music. And so that kind of saturated my life, and movies were not the prominent part of my life as they are now. But they were, at that time, kind of maybe second in command to my music, and music was number one at that time in my life. So anyway, I loved this movie. I just saw this for the first time last night, and of course, everybody people can't stop talking about this. Like, Wesley Snipes is Blade. We're just going nuts about it, and that's particularly what has grabbed me about this. And I thought to myself, okay, I have to see this movie. Then I can't believe I never saw it. To be honest, when I was 22 or 23, I guess I was 23 maybe, when this came out, and I thought to myself, okay, so it just seemed kind of falling in that same vein of cheesiness. This came out a year before The Matrix, and so you could kind of see the same type of tropes falling. Matrix came out in 1999, and same, fighting with big guns and trench coats. So and then flying through the air with your trench coat on and doing the flips in the air with the trench coat on. That was something that, of course, became popular. I actually thought it was cheesy at the time. I thought it's fun. It's fun as hell, man. It's fun to watch, and definitely, that just reminds me of a friend who wanted to move to New York just so that they could wear a trench coat and live in New York and wear trench coats, because New Yorkers, whatever. Anyway, so this film was just so much fun. Oh my gosh. I was blown away at how good it was. I had no idea it would be this good, because I thought it would just be a bunch of blood and guts and which is fine and fun, because I love Ash vs. Evil Dead. I love the Evil Dead films, and there were people who used to be on this channel that would know way more about those films than I do, but I actually love them. I do love them. I miss you, Joe. Would love to have you back on. So anyway, but we're talking about Blade today. We're going to talk about how I really enjoy this. I used to always make fun of fighting in trench coats, and this was always almost an overused choice of costuming in the 90s, because we saw it in Johnny Mnemonic, we saw it in Matrix, Darkman, Young Guns, you name it. This was all over the 90s and 80s. But mostly it was started to get really popular with this movie, and then with the Matrix and stuff. So, and it was something that was used a lot. The Matrix came out 1 year after this film did. It makes you wonder if it was something that was stolen from Blade, or if it was something that the Matrix writers had just thought, well, of course he fights people in this virtual reality in a trench coat, of course. And it's kind of funny here. So we first see a secret dance club below a meat packing plant, and of course a woman is luring her supper into the area. The confetti that is dispersed amongst the crowd is blood, and the whole scene changes. People covered in red was a surprising visual effect. One woman says with a sexual tone, "Baby," as she reveals her fangs. This is almost comical, yet still very fun. just fun in a way, like the way that Wesley Snipes is just the way he carries himself through this whole thing, just like, and that was horrible, but like, just like, what are you talking about? You got him? Hey, he was very just almost not taking himself too seriously in that. The music is very typical of the 90s music, club music. It reminds me of Firestarter by Prodigy, if you remember that movie. It's that same that was extremely popular in the 90s, if you remember. If you don't remember, well, maybe you weren't there. If you weren't there, that's what it was. Go watch Hackers, that movie Hackers, from just like constantly berated with. Anyway, it has the exact same beat, just not as complex as Prodigy. So it's a kind of a watered down version of that same type of stuff. Just more generic for the club music. The thing to really take away here is that the music just allows you to escape, nothing too complex, just fun. Wesley adds comedic and heroic character by smirking in between each of the parry or evades with silver and a sword. Acrobatic martial arts flood the entire building as Snipes' character lays down the law with anti-vampire vengeance, or maybe he is just schooling them. He doesn't take himself too seriously. The way he is able to take things lightly allow him to work his way into our hearts as someone who still gets the job done while achieving the role as some sort of anti-hero. The very next moment when Blade gets shot right in the chest by the cops, he says, Mofo, are you out of your damn mind? It's just very like, just like, I couldn't believe. And it was very funny. It was very funny. And the cops run away like they were spooked or something. That was part of ridiculous. They're just like, oh no, he's bulletproof. And they just it was pretty funny. Just ludicrous stuff that's actually, still very fun. There is a lot of more artistic qualities to be the editing. Blade has rescued a woman who is basically a future problem. She was bit by a burn victim escapee. Quinn. He couldn't kill her because she reacted. He couldn't kill Karen because she reacted for him just like his mother had when he was first born. This was a good visual reinforcement. The slow motion, the slow mutation in the woman. They inject her with garlic. Enter Udo Kier. Great moment with him in there. This guy's been in like every 80s and 90s movie, like every action movie. He's just a character actor. This guy's been in so many movies, pretty much all the movies in this time period. There is a reason for this. He is fun to watch. Here they sit in their boardroom, just like in The Crow. So this is another common trope. This was like in The Crow and many others. This is where the villains reside. And this did remind me quite a bit of like Justice League, Legion of Doom type of thing, same type of thing where they're in this boardroom, this long, but I could imagine it being just drawn as a comic, the way it was shot, the angles, everything. Enter Deacon Frost, aka Steven Dorff. Talk about Steven Dorff for a second here. So Steven Dorff, if you don't know who he is, I'm actually going to do a whole video on him because the guy's been in a million great movies, and his IMDb is ridiculously long, but he's not really a well-known guy. He didn't have very many huge roles, but he has been around forever, and he's actually one of my favorite actors of all time, Steven Dorff. I'm going to do another video on him in a bit here. This is where we learn that the tension between different generations of vampires. They even look down on him, on Deacon Frost, because he isn't a pure vampire, and maybe, or at least Dragonet does, because his tactics are restless. The end of this scene is hilarious. Deacon Frost says to him, you may wake up one day and find yourself extinct. Yeah, you might end up one day waking up and finding yourself extinct. That was hilarious. Blade reveals that he seems to be developing a resistance to the serum, perhaps something that helps keep the jaws of Satan at bay. plays Karen. She is told by Chris Christopherson, who is the Whistler, about vampires, and she doesn't believe. The ominous nocturna, the haunting feeling that follows is of pure suspense with possible dread. As Karen and Blade ride through the city over the bridge, we are haunted by the music, but also haunted by the pure essence of intrigue. With the twilight sun bursting through the buildings, I was particularly impressed with this scene because it actually reminded me of being buzzed or intoxicated. The way all the light that existed in the scene was almost camouflaged or deepened or darkened into itself to create a sense of slight euphoria. So I don't know if you agree with me on that. I'm going to show the screen here, but it did make me think of that. That's funny. This line here, we're gonna jack you up, make him hurt bad. The banter and animosity between Frost and Gaetano Dragonetti, his both hilarious and tension. It's both hilarious and tension building. To these two actively show disdain for each other, and yet there is some sexual tension. It seems. He says, Gaetano Dragonetti says like something like, you bore me. It's like there's some little, which is it's funny. Blade just leaves Karen on the street in the afternoon as he just leaves her there. We get to experience the transformation process through her as she is overcome with fear and tension while mistakenly interpreting others' moves. There's some great. That's one thing I have to point out. There are some great one-liners in this movie. Like she just is like, "You use me as bait." He's like, "Get over it."
You use me as bait?
Get over it.
It's like, that's just such a great. That's actually a great comeback to that. Get over it, because it's so dismissive and so nonchalant at the same time. Just fun. It's just funny. It's funny. We ain't exactly. He's like, oh yeah, we ain't exactly the March of Dimes when he's like robbing. He's like robbing, taking his watch and stuff.
Oh great, now you're robbing. You gonna rob me too?
How do you think that we fund this organization, huh? We're not exactly the March of Dimes.
You better wake up. The world you live in is just a sugar-coated topping. There's another world beneath it, the real world. And if you want to survive, then you better learn to pull the trigger. Like, that's just great one-liners.
Always on the move.